The quiet Arizona desert night. A Ring doorbell camera violently yanked from its mount.
A trail of blood left on a front doorstep. An Apple Watch with a white band lying abandoned on a bedroom floor.
And just like that, a beloved television family is plunged into an unthinkable nightmare. Savannah Guthrie opens up about her family's painful ordeal. Welcome to Starscope Report. Join us as we uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
It is just a really profound and jarring shift, going from that brightly lit, highly controlled morning TV environment straight into the darkest, most chaotic corners of a criminal investigation.
Exactly. And today we're taking you on a deep dive into a stack of really harrowing sources. We've got breaking news reports, law enforcement press conferences, intimate podcast interviews, and a deeply personal memoir.
Yeah, our mission today is to look way beyond the shocking headlines about the kidnapping of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. We're going to unpack, the mechanics of the intense FBI investigation, the media circus that followed, and the incredible human resilience required to survive at the very center of it all.
Right, because ultimately, this is a story about what happens when public fame collides with private tragedy and, the psychological toll of navigating absolute, terrifying ambiguity right in the public eye.
Definitely. So let's start with the timeline, because the way investigators pinpointed the exact moment of the crime relies on this fascinating piece of everyday technology.
Oh, right. Nancy's bedside pacemaker monitor.
Yeah. It only missed its scheduled transmission at exactly 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, 2026.
Wow. So it acted almost like a digital dead man's switch.
Exactly. The absence of data basically became the most critical piece of evidence they had. And to understand the weight of that timestamp, we really have to understand who Nancy Guthrie is.
Right. She's 84 years old.
Yeah, 84. And by all accounts from her family, she is mentally sharp as a tack. But physically, she's incredibly frail. She suffered from severe back pain. She's heavily reliant on daily medications just to keep her body functioning.
And she lives alone, right?
She does, yeah. In the Catalina foothills, which is a fairly secluded suburb just outside of Tucson, Arizona, Savannah even noted that on a good day, her mother might have just enough energy to walk down to the mailbox.
So we can just immediately rule out the idea of her going for some midnight stroll and getting disoriented.
Exactly. And the lead up to this nightmare is completely mundane. It's a Saturday night, January 31st. Nancy takes an Uber to her daughter Andy's house for dinner.
Sounds like a totally normal evening.
Right. And then at 9:50 p.m., she gets dropped back off at home by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. He watches the garage door close. And that is the very last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie.
Wow. So when did they actually realize something was wrong?
The alarm bells didn't start ringing until the next morning, Sunday, February 1st. Nancy is a really devout, regular churchgoer, but she completely misses her scheduled virtual church live stream.
Oh, man.
Yeah, a friend from the congregation notices she hasn't logged on, so they call the family around 11 a.m. Her relatives rush over to the house, and they walk into this scene that authorities later carefully described to the press as, quote, very concerning.
And, the family's initial reaction here is just so incredibly human. Savannah gets this panicked phone call from her sister. When they find the back doors of the house propped wide open, Savannah's immediate logical assumption is that her mother had a medical emergency.
Yeah, she assumes paramedics came in the middle of the night, propped the doors open to get a stretcher through, and just rushed her to the hospital.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
That is the human brain's neurological need for closure, right? When faced with the terrifying unknown, our minds desperately try to construct this benign, rational explanation.
Totally. But as the family moves through the house, that fragile theory just collapses. Nancy's purse is sitting right there. Her phone is still there.
And her medications, right?
Yes. Her crucial, life-sustaining daily medications are left behind. And paramedics do not leave those behind.
No, they don't. And then the truly sinister discovery surfaced. They realized the doorbell camera had been physically disabled earlier that morning at 1:47 a.m.
It's just chilling.
Yeah, and there is blood found on the front doorstep. Blood that was later swabbed, forensic tested, and confirmed to match Nancy's DNA.
And while Savannah is still miles away, trying to cling to that paramedic theory, her brother, Cameron, is analyzing the scene.
Right, because he has a totally different background.
Exactly. Cameron is a former military intelligence officer and a fighter pilot. So he doesn't look at the scene with a civilian's desperate hope. He looks at it tactically.
Oh.
Yeah, he sees the propped doors, the disabled camera, The missing frail woman, the blood. He immediately pieces the mechanics of the scene together. He tells Savannah on the phone, like, she hasn't wandered off, she hasn't been taken to a hospital, she has been kidnapped for ransom.
That is just, I can't even imagine hearing that.
Right.
Savannah admitted in later interviews that she completely rejected it at first. But when the reality actually set in, she asked her brother this absolutely heartbreaking question. She asked, do you think it's because of me?
Oh, man.
And he had to tell her, I'm sorry, sweetie, but yeah, maybe.
And to really understand why that realization is so devastating for this specific family, we have to look at their history. This family's bond was forged in the fires of sudden, unexpected trauma.
Right, back in 1988?
Yes. Savannah's father, Charles Guthrie, died completely unexpectedly of a heart attack while on a mining trip in Mexico. Savannah was only 16. It completely shattered their world.
So Nancy really became the anchor for them.
She did. Nancy never remarried. She became the matriarch, like the singular pillar of the family. So to have her suddenly ripped away opens up this deeply buried psychological wound for her children.
It really is history repeating itself, but this time with just malevolent intent.
Yeah.
But wait till you hear what came next. Later in the deep dive, we'll talk about the chilling ransom notes and the shocking twist nobody saw coming. If you're loving these Hollywood twists and deep dives, make sure you're subscribed. We've got even crazier stories ahead.
So the pivot from a missing persons inquiry to a massive federal manhunt was almost instantaneous. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, partnered up with the FBI and Customs and Border Protection.
It really brought in everyone.
Oh, yeah. They deployed drones, specialized police dogs, aerial resources, just completely blanketing the unforgiving desert terrain around the Catalina foothills.
But the physical search quickly gives way to a digital one. And this is where the sheer scale of modern criminal investigations really comes into focus. On February 10th, the FBI manages to pull recovered footage from Google Nest's back-end systems.
Which is incredible, because even though the camera was physically yanked off the wall, the data had already pinged the cloud.
Exactly. And the footage they released is chilling. We see this masked individual. The FBI profiles him as average build, roughly 5'9" to 5'10", sporting a black mustache.
Right. And he's wearing gloves, carrying this 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker backpack.
And he's armed too, right?
He is, but in a very clumsy way. The gun is improperly placed in a crotch holster. We basically watch him try to disable the camera with these light, hesitant taps, and when that fails, he just awkwardly covers the lens with the foliage of a nearby potted plant.
Just a guy with a backpack and a potted plant systematically dismantling a family's life. It's surreal. But this footage being released to the public triggers an absolute avalanche of information, like over 13,000 tips pour into the FBI.
That is a lot of tips.
Yeah, and I have to challenge the conventional wisdom here. We always hear about the power of crowdsourcing justice on the internet, but doesn't 13,000 tips actually hinder the FBI more than it helps?
It absolutely creates an incredibly difficult signal-to-noise ratio. Because every single tip, no matter how tenuous, has to be run to ground.
Right, they can't just ignore them.
Exactly. For example, one tip led to a man down in Rio Rico being detained after a traffic stop. Properties were searched, and he was entirely cleared. Another tip pointed to a gray Range Rover spotted in the parking lot of a local Culver's restaurant.
Okay, that sounds promising.
Investigators seized the vehicle, and they actually found gloves inside matching the suspect's description.
Wow, that sounds like a massive breakthrough.
It really does. But they swabbed the gloves, run the DNA, interview the owner, and it turns out the DNA belongs to a local restaurant worker who had absolutely nothing to do with the crime.
Oh my gosh, so that is dozens of federal agents spending days chasing a ghost, all because a well-meaning citizen called in a coincidence.
Which perfectly explains why the FBI had to rely on the ransom notes to find the actual signal and all that noise.
Yeah, but this is where the kidnapper's strategy feels so twisted. Millions of dollars in Bitcoin are suddenly being demanded, but the notes aren't sent privately to the family. They are sent directly to media outlets like TMZ and local CBS affiliates.
It really feels like they were weaponizing the public, doesn't it?
Yes, because if you send it to the family, they can quietly work with the FBI. If you send it to TMZ, the family is suddenly under a microscope from millions of people asking, well, why haven't you paid?
And that is precisely the psychological leverage they were aiming for. By involving the media, they force a public negotiation. But it also creates a logistical nightmare for the FBI.
Because of all the fakes.
Exactly. Once the media knows there are ransom notes, every scammer in the country tries to get involved. The FBI had to sift through numerous fakes. They actually utilized advanced digital forensics to trace two specific notes to the exact same IP address, confirming them as legitimate communications from the actual kidnappers.
But wait, how did they verify those notes weren't just from a sophisticated scammer who managed to spoof an IP address?
Through a crucial investigative tool called holdback evidence.
Oh, right, where they hide details from the public.
Yes. When the police process a crime scene, they intentionally keep highly specific, bizarre, or seemingly minor details out of the press. Note 1, which arrived on February 2nd, contained demands for millions in Bitcoin, but it also referenced an Apple Watch with a white band left on the bedroom floor and a broken back porch light.
Okay, so because those details had never been leaked, the FBI knew immediately they were communicating with the people who were inside Nancy's house.
Exactly.
But tracing the ransom itself is incredibly complex. I mean, they demanded Bitcoin, which is entirely digital and decentralized. How do you even begin to track that?
Well, it's actually a common misconception that Bitcoin is completely anonymous. It's actually pseudonymous. The blockchain is a public ledger.
So anyone can see it.
Right. Imagine a massive, transparent bank vault where everyone can see how much money is in a specific glass box, but there's no name attached to the box. The FBI can watch the Bitcoin move from wallet to wallet in real time.
So they just wait for them to cash out.
Exactly. The trap snaps shut when the criminals attempt to exchange that Bitcoin for physical cash in an exchange, because legitimate exchanges require identity verification.
So they are basically watching this digital vault, waiting, but then Note 2 arrives on February 6th, and the tone completely changes.
Yeah, there are no demands in that one.
No. Instead, the note delivers the devastating claim that Nancy had died shortly after the abduction. The kidnappers allegedly expressed regret, stating they, quote, didn't mean to kill her.
Which is just awful.
Yeah.
And this is where the FBI makes a controversial but necessary strategic move. They asked the media outlets who received that note to keep it completely secret.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they suppressed the information for months, not releasing it to the public until late June so they can maintain operational security and continue trying to flush the kidnappers out.
Meanwhile, as the real kidnappers go silent, the open-source nature of the investigation attracts absolute parasites. Like, Derek Colella, a 42-year-old man from California, gets hold of the family's contact info. While Savannah and her siblings are paralyzed with grief, this guy is texting them, posing as the abductor, demanding Bitcoin to make a quick buck. I mean, how sick do you have to be? He ultimately pleaded guilty to harassment, but it just shows how media exposure paints a target right on the victims' backs.
It really does. And the profile of the case escalated so rapidly that it actually reached the highest levels of the federal government. On February 16th, President Donald Trump called Savannah directly to offer the support of federal law enforcement and subsequently made public statements threatening the kidnappers with the death penalty if Nancy wasn't returned safely.
Right. And just to be clear for you guys listening, we are merely reporting the facts from the source material impartially here. We aren't endorsing any political viewpoints or policies, just laying out what actually happened during the investigation.
Absolutely.
But it just shows the inescapable magnitude of the situation. It transformed from a quiet break-in at a Catalina Foothills home into a national focal point. And that's not even the wildest part. Up next, an eerie childhood memory that seems to predict this exact nightmare and Savannah's agonizing return to the spotlight.
Yeah, because right in the middle of this dark, ongoing ordeal, on February 27th, Savannah Guthrie's previously scheduled memoir is released to the public. It's a deeply personal book centered on her faith, titled Mostly What God Does.
And the timing of that release is just staggering. She wrote this book in the quiet, stolen moments of her life, typing on her laptop in the car, sitting at the kitchen table with her kids long before this nightmare ever began.
It's surreal.
But reading the source material now, there's a specific eerie detail in the book that is almost impossible to process.
Yes, Savannah recounts this really vivid childhood memory. Her older cousin Terry used to play this elaborate, playful game with Savannah and her sister. Terry would playfully kidnap the girls in the pre-dawn darkness for summer road trips. Yeah, they'd pile into a station wagon, and Savannah would pretend to call her mom from a payphone, laughing and shouting, "Mom, Cousin Terry kidnapped us."
The surreal mirroring of trauma here is so heavy. You have this innocent, joyful childhood memory of a pretend kidnapping. And it stands in direct, brutal contrast to the terrifying reality of her actual mother being taken in the pre-dawn darkness.
It clearly fed into the immense psychological burden Savannah was already carrying. I mean, in her first interview back, she was completely stripped of her usual polished anchor persona. She openly agonized over the guilt.
Which is just so heartbreaking to watch.
It really is. She hypothesized about her own fame, asking out loud like, did somebody think, oh, that lady has money, we can make a quick buck?
Yeah.
She talked about constantly apologizing to her mother in her prayers and to her siblings, saying, I'm so sorry I brought this to her bedside.
Think about how hard it is to just show up to your job when you have a minor family dispute going on behind the scenes. Now imagine sitting in a national anchor chair, broadcasting the news to millions of Americans, while knowing your mother was violently taken from her home, and you might be the reason why. How does the human brain even compartmentalize that level of stress?
It requires an extraordinary support system and really rigid boundaries. When Savannah returned to her anchor chair on the Today Show on April 6th, the network producers had to implement strict, unprecedented procedures.
What kind of procedures?
Well, they had a protocol to secretly sequester her offset if any breaking news about her mother's case came across the wire. They had to protect her from finding out horrific updates on live television.
That is intense. She actually admitted that the commute was the hardest part. She cried every single morning on the drive to the studio and every evening on the way home. But the workplace itself became a strange kind of sanctuary.
Right, a distraction.
Yeah, she leaned heavily on her coworkers, particularly Jenna Bush Hager, who offered her a brief respite from the relentless 247 anxiety of the investigation.
And the psychological survival tactics she employed are just fascinating. If we look closely at a podcast interview Savannah did with Annie F. Downs to discuss the memoir, we see the philosophical framework that was getting her through this.
Right, the concept of faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Savannah talked about how, for her, faith isn't about having a neat list of answers. She explained that the core of her faith, especially during seasons of profound spiritual dryness, is simply the act of showing up.
Which is such a powerful reframing of grief. We are all wired to seek answers, to demand closure. But Savannah shared a realization from the early days of the search that completely upends that. She said she prayed that she could handle anything, any horrible truth, but she felt she couldn't survive the torture of not knowing.
Yeah, the ambiguity is the hardest part.
But then she described hearing a distinct internal voice say to her, "You do know where she is. She's with me."
Wow. And by concluding, whether she's on this earth still or whether she is in heaven, I know where she is, Savannah achieved this radical acceptance of ambiguity.
It's incredibly powerful.
It is. She didn't have the physical answers. The FBI didn't have the answers. But she found a cognitive resolution that basically allowed her to function. It allowed her to go back on national television, to continue funding the search, and to offer a $1 million reward for information, all while quietly accepting the agonizing probability that her mother had already passed away.
It is an absolute masterclass in walking through the dark. It's just an incredible testament to the human spirit's capacity to hold both profound grief and enduring hope simultaneously. Stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next on Starscope Report.
Yeah, to pull all these threads together, this tragedy really forces us to look at the collateral damage of modern celebrity in a hyper-connected age. In an era where everyone's life is mapped, tagged, and just fully accessible online, what does privacy and safety really mean for the extended, vulnerable family members of public figures?
Exactly. When fame is a family affair, does the risk inherently become one too? We started this deep dive talking about a shattered Ring camera on a quiet desert night. It's a chilling metaphor for the illusion of security. We build these modern technological fences, cameras, biometric pacemakers, digital locks, thinking they can categorize and protect our world perfectly.
But then the unexpected happens, right? The camera goes dark, the timeline stops, and we're left navigating a landscape that is deeply, terrifyingly murky.
And in that sudden darkness, when all the technology fails, all we are left with is the sheer human willpower of how we choose to show up the next morning. You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.